it's just great to be able to sort of wrap that around with a panel talking a little bit about the challenges of foresight and what it really means to be effective at foresight in a world that is racing ahead of us faster than any of us can kind of keep up. I think just we should start by acknowledging we're living through some crazy times. The COVID pandemic that has kept us virtual, maybe it's trending down, but the ransomware pandemic sure ain't pending down right now. Even just in the last week, I mean, obviously we've seen a set of scrutiny of revelations at one of the world's largest and most sophisticated technology firms, but it sort of put in the background the fact that there was a massive outage at that firm on Monday. No one's fault, just a kind of a maintenance error, and could have easily been an attack, but it shows us that the digital sort of landscape, the digital ecosystem may not be quite as robust, even at the very top of the pinnacle as we think it is. And just yesterday, of course, if folks haven't heard about it, incredible breach, maybe I shouldn't call it a breach, at a company called Twitch, owned by another one of the world's most sophisticated technology companies, which basically had its entire code base stolen and posted online. So not a data breach. This isn't the next like privacy leak. This is the entire code base, all the intellectual property, basically the entire business. That's the world we're living in. And when we started CLTC, I guess it's now about 7 years ago, we sensed in our early listening tours, with talking to folks around the industry, talking to folks in government, talking to folks in academia, this urgency, this feeling that we were operating a little bit like, I like to say, like emergency department physicians, just trying to kind of deal with whatever comes in the door that day, limited resources, try to patch it up, get it working again, send it back out for somebody else to take care of the long-term problem. But there really often wasn't anyone else out there to take care of the long-term problem. And so, as Kelly said, we wanted to develop a foresight perspective so that maybe we could get out ahead a little bit of that emergency mindset. And I think one of my key learnings and the things that most importantly motivates the conversation today is that as interesting and as academically challenging and as fun as developing foresight can be, it's hard. What's really hard is getting decision makers to act on foresight in the midst of that emergency department landscape. And so we wanted to bring together a couple of folks who are sort of sitting at the nexus of that challenge in different parts of the world, different parts of the industry, and learn from them what they've been able to discover about that challenge as they've worked that problem now for years. So I want to introduce our three panelists. The first is Dr. Alyssa J. Abdullah, who I understand goes by Dr. J, which is fantastic. Currently MasterCard's Deputy Chief Security Officer. She leads the emerging corporate security solutions team and is responsible for protecting MasterCard's information assets and driving the future of security at that company. So you can just imagine what that job is like on a day-to-day basis. We also have Derek Mankey. Derek joins us from FortiGuard Labs at Fortinet. He leads FortiGuard Labs' global threat intelligence team and works with leading CISOs and CTOs across Fortune 500 companies around the world, multiple industries. You can imagine what Derek's day job is like. And then finally, we have Claire Vishik, who joins us from Intel. She's a fellow and GMT CTO at Intel. Her work focuses on hardware security, trusted computing, privacy-enhancing technologies, artificial intelligence, cryptography, and related global policy issues. So you can imagine what Claire's day-to-day job is like as well. And thank you all three for joining us for this conversation. I want to start by just giving you each opportunity to tell us a story. Academics are always being overly analytical and trying to look for generalizations and big theories and stuff like that. But much of what we try to do actually depends on our day-to-day experience of trying to get our work done. So it'd be great to hear from each of you a story, a personal anecdote about a tough and unanticipated challenge that you faced in your respective jobs and the lessons that you learned that helped inform how you try to see and mitigate future cybersecurity challenges. In particular, things that sometimes, come on your radar screen and you see, but yet aren't at the center of other people's or your organization's radar screen. How do you get the C-suites, the boards to pay attention to this stuff? Dr. J, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. And congratulations, Steve, to you. And thank you for your work with the center and everything that you've done for UC Berkeley. So first, let me start out by saying that I'm going to kind of twist the question just a little bit, because as a African-American female in a male-dominated industry and a male-dominated field, I've always had personal anecdotes about unanticipated challenges. So I'll start out, I'll kind of talk about just really quickly my life. I'm going to talk about an unanticipated challenge in my life and how it actually relates to cybersecurity. I started out as a radio DJ. I wanted to be a radio DJ. I was a DJ at a jazz station, at an urban hip hop station when I was really, really, really young. Urban hip hop first and then a jazz station. And I went to college, and everyone, they have this idea of who you are and what you come with just through, looking and talking and presentation and all of that. And my English professor said, you're not an English major. You really aren't. And you're not a mass communications major. So you need to give up the whole DJ thing. And she was right. And my math teacher said, you're truly a mathematician. You're a mathematician at heart. You've got this. And they sized me up really, really well. But what I will say is, as they thought that they knew me and knew what I wanted to do, and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do a lot of public speaking, but my English teacher told me, radio and TV was not in my future, and that I needed to figure that out. What it taught me really was what you think is may not always be what it is. And that has kind of carried me throughout my career, throughout dealing with diversity challenges. And I think about that in cybersecurity. We always think in a box. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in our conversation today too. But we grow up thinking in boxes that things have to fit a certain way, that you have to go through a certain path to get somewhere. And I will tell you, the adversary doesn't have 25 years of cybersecurity experience with degrees and all of these other things added on to it. And so we have to kind of think differently about how we want to attack the adversary or defend our own networks and infrastructures if we want to win in the cyber war. So that's just really briefly.
Really interesting. Derek, tell us an interesting story that you can share with us about how you overcome some of these challenges or confront them.
Yeah, sure thing, Steve. And I also want to echo the congratulations to yourself. And from everything I've seen, I know you're going to be surely missed there. And anyone in this field, we always need good people, Steve, as you know. So, and that's something I wanted to talk about. Actually, it's part of the challenges. Myself, I've been following threat intelligence and cybercrime for over 20 years. I actually started my career and journey as a malware analyst or reverse engineer, looking at the weapons, if you will. So, the direct front lines and the impact. And it was a very different threat landscape 20 years ago. And, back then it was just a matter of a reactive operational model, the proverbial cat and mouse game, right? We saw a threat, we added a signature, we protected against it. That was our focus. And I actually built a lot of distributed computing cluster systems that are in production today, and they're still relevant, but it was just one piece back then, right? And that it was sort of a tunnel vision focus in the industry. That's what we were looking at, and just focusing on, let's protect against 1 million pieces of malware, 5 million pieces of malware. That number ballooned, right? Because as the attack surface expanded exponentially. And one of the things that we started to see, and, myself, we were thinking with a vendor hat on, but what we didn't really anticipate was how quickly this has evolved on the cyber criminal ecosystem end, right? We were just busy looking at the weapons, right? And effectively building a bigger fortress. Every day we would build a bigger fortress, put more bricks on the wall, and call it a day and hope that it wasn't going to break. And what we started to quickly see was that, cyber criminals, it wasn't just that, the typical image of a hacker in the basement operating, right? It has evolved into full-blown operations, very, very much a mirror image of legitimate business operations, affiliate models, the CAAS, a crime as a service model. And just where that is today, I didn't anticipate that to be there. Definitely not that quick. And so it really forced us to rethink threat intelligence. Instead of just looking at the weapons and the indicators, wait a minute, we need to back up with foresight and look at, really thinking like a cyber criminal, right? Examining those business units of them. We know that these are the weapons coming up, right? That we're being hit with. What do their factories look like, right? How are these people connected? And what's their strategy and tactics and thinking, right? And that's, we always talk about cybercrime having no borders, and nowadays verticals and sectors have no borders because we're actively seeing ransomware attacks on cross sector almost equally, right? It's not just about finance as an example anymore. So these are the challenges, but with the Foresight now, we've really switched our model of threat intelligence to yes, we still have all that distributed clusters in place, the automation. We've built machine learning and AI models to effectively handle those mundane tasks. But now, as you know, we're faced with a skills gap, and we're really focusing on looking at the TTPs, the techniques, tactics, procedures of cyber criminals, interoperating too, right? So that Foresight, we've needed to take that outside of our wheelhouse as a vendor and actually work in the industry. So I'm talking about private to private sector, private to public sector, academia as well, how we can all work together to address that problem.
Thanks, Derek. Claire, I understand you might be having some trouble with video, but if you can hear us.
I can hear and see everyone, but I cannot display my own video. If everyone can hear me, then we are fine.
We can.
Yeah. Excellent discussion. Thank you for the invitation. To me, the most interesting part of cybersecurity now is how broad it is, how connected it is with all kinds of problems. This might be driven a little bit by the fact that like the two previous panelists, my road to cybersecurity and security in general was not direct. It was not premeditated. I was studying math, and actually originally was a double major in the European linguistics. And in graduate school, I saw a little ad flopping in the wind for a position that had nothing to do with security, but that ended up because of a series of circumstances that were completely unexpected, making a cryptographer out of me, and then leading into cybersecurity. So coming into security from a range of other areas. I have done economic modeling, I have done hardware design, I have done network planning when I was in AT&T Labs, shows to me how fragmented the field is and how broad its influences. I will give you a few examples, and all of them are at the intersection of privacy, cybersecurity, policy, and technology. A very obvious example is the connection of cybersecurity with areas that we don't perceive as security. For instance, at some point, a very popular, if I can say so, cyber attack was the one that affected the energy management on your device. Essentially, the energy was automatically set up at the maximum, draining your machine very quickly and making it difficult to operate, sort of a mini denial of service attack. It didn't have a direct connection to what we perceive as security, but it affected the availability of the platform and the security of other services associated with it. And another example that I would like to put forward is a lot of writings, discussions, debates that we had, maybe 13 years ago about the connection between RFID and tracking. This is a valid concern, but the majority of RFID tags that were under discussion at the time were the passive tags that have about 1 millimeter range for the signal. So it would be necessary to track a person with shoes that have an RFID, with shoes that have RFID tags. It would be necessary to pave the roads with meters and with readers. This, of course, is not possible. It's much less expensive to have a team of people following this person everywhere. But there were significant ramifications in the policy space, in the area of interest space, that actually made RFID more vulnerable for a while because it detracted from the areas where the real privacy concerns, the real security vulnerabilities were located. So I think when we are talking about cybersecurity in the new environment, where we have anything from edge clouds to artificial intelligence to micro devices and even systems of systems beginning to emerge like smart cities, it's impossible to talk about cybersecurity without understanding how the systems work and what effect they have on society. So working truly at the intersection of these two areas is very important, and I commend this center for doing just this.
Thank you so much, Claire. You know, each of you have raised about 10 different interesting points that I would like to dig into, but I'll probably only have time maybe to dig into one or two with each. So I want to go back to you, Dr. J. Just kind of reflect on the fact that you've all sort of had indirect pathways into this field. It's one of the things that we discovered with great interest and great excitement when we launched our master's program, that like the people who were coming back for more training to become professional cybersecurity operators, leaders, CISOs, had the most unbelievably diverse background. And it was sort of like, what's going on here? And second, we sort of realized, well, that actually is functional for the kinds of jobs and kinds of challenges that you face. Dr. J, you brought up this question of, like, I call it the intersection between iron cages, the notion of a bureaucracy, whose essence is to have rules and procedures and boxes and reporting requirements and dashboards, and digital networks that sort of try to root around all that kind of stuff. One of the things that we've talked about a lot, and increasingly in the last couple of years, has been the value of a diverse workforce in trying to make those two things a little bit less friction filled. And it would be great to hear some of your thoughts or about your experience and your just kind of general view of, like, how important is diversity in that equation, and how can we get better at it?
Of course, diversity is super important. It goes without saying, but let me double click a little bit on why. And I teased a little bit of it earlier when I said, the adversary is not in a box. The adversary is not having a panel on diversity and introducing, how do we fill these jobs with more diverse skill sets and all that. That's not how it works. And we on for lack of any better term, we on the right side of cybersecurity, as opposed to the wrong side of cybersecurity, we on the right side of cybersecurity are used to processes, procedures, plans, things fitting the way they're supposed to fit, science happening organically the way it's supposed to happen. But the adversary has taken that and said, come on, come all. If you have a thought, if you have an opinion, if you have an idea, And this is why the adversary is able to pivot very quickly and move very fast. And we have to be able, I'm not saying we should strip away the processes and policies and procedures. We cannot do that. But we can't continue to sit with the brain power that we have and say, well, based on my beliefs and based on how I grew up and based on how I think, Stephen and Derek should think the same way. That just, we just can't do that. And when we do that, that is how we continue to miss the adversary hitting us in all of these different directions. The adversary now coming out with, and now I think a new challenge will be fooling us with synthetic IDs, and deep fakes are going to take off and all of these type of things. So we have to really not just have a discussion about diversity. And then when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about diversity, inclusion, equity. I'm talking about neurodiversity too, because guess what? No one is exempt from the adversary. The adversary is attacking everyone. So my belief is, as well as, there should not be gender, we should not have gender or age discrimination in it at all. They're attacking, senior citizens differently than they're attacking millennials. And we need to hear that. We need to hear that from a lot of different perspectives. And if not, then the solutions that we build are going to be difficult for everyone to accept and learn how to use those solutions. When we talk about, how does my mom or my grandma use social media? We can't overcomplicate it and bear it down with too much stuff because of how we think that we haven't allowed an opportunity for it to be accepted by all. And that's when you have the diversity challenges, when you don't consider neurodiversity, when you don't consider equity and all of these other themes, then you really have a one-sided solution.
Derek, let me kick that over to you with a slightly different trajectory. So here we are, we've got the high science tools, we've got great technology, and then we've got the kinds of challenges that Dr. J just pointed to of how that stuff actually manifests when it gets down into a big bureaucracy or, my grandmother's social media feed. And that's really exciting. And you're in a situation of trying not just to kind of unravel that as it looks today, but again, as you said, pointing, 2-3 years to the future, where we're in the realm of what's called known unknowns. So how do you do that at a company like Fortinet, which is also at the same time being held to quarterly earnings?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, I'd like to take my pen and underscore that statement that Dr. J just said on the adversarial agility. It's a big issue that we face today. In fact, I did a presentation at RSA conference. It was about 2 years ago on the accelerating attack chain, the weaponization of offensive automation and now even machine learning models that we're seeing, because we're always a target as a vendor. So when we look at, the classic matrix, right? The known knowns and the known unknowns first. That's what we're very good at. I have the benefit of having over 7 million sensors deployed worldwide, a great data science team, plowing through that information, normalizing that information. We issue biannual reports. We just issued one last month on the first half of 2021. And this is across the attack surface. We have good visibility on that. So I'm able to see malware movement, exploit vulnerability movement, botnets, command and control systems, all of, again, more of the kill chain, right, of attacks. And that's the known knowns. That's what we're seeing. We understand. That's easy to report on. That's easy to make it to rank in terms of threats and prioritization when it becomes a board level discussion. And it's all those things that we do when we create these guides. The other part of that is the known unknowns, of course, right? So these are the things we see, but we don't fully understand yet. And this is where we engage with our threat research capabilities to do that deeper digging, the threat hunting, the reverse engineering on it. And that really paints a good picture of where we're at today. But we pivot on that, right? We're able to take what we know today on the, finding a patient zero, as we call it, the 0 days when we're uncovering this. So we see it, we don't know it. when we find information about that, we're actually able to uncover and unmap more information about the adversary, right? Typically, we're finding things like beta programs that they're creating that's not public yet, right? So those are the things that we're not seeing yet, but we're starting to understand, the unknown knowns. And so that's our approach to that. And actually, Steve, every year we sit down annually to look at our best guess, educated guesses based off of all of the known knowns and the known unknowns. So that baseline trend that we're building, we look at that and we see, okay, based off of this, where's their technology going, right? Mm-hmm. Again, we actually build a roadmap for them. We don't release it to them, but we're building this internally so we can understand and anticipate where they're going to be. And we actually categorize that, by a 1 to 2 year outlook and then a 2 to 5 year outlook. And largely that 2 to 5 year outlook, when we're getting closer towards that 5 years, of course, that gets into the realm of the unknowns, which is, of course, the most difficult. But really, that's the way that we approach it. We sit down every quarter also and review those because it's, those trends actually start to become realities and shift. And we're also starting to use not just, we've built a sort of OSI model to this, right? Where we have at the bottom of the stack, automation, machine learning, and AI. That was on the reactive part before. Finding the threats, the patient zero problem, all of that. We're actually working on some really cool projects in the industry, right? EPSS is one of them, exploit prediction scoring system. This is with first.org. So we're actually using all that data to do predictive modeling now off vulnerabilities and exploits, right? Where we see them going. How can we create early warning systems to get ahead of the curve, as an example, too, just like weather forecasting from the, when a hurricane is approaching. So that's our approach. Never a boring day, like I said, but it's a vast problem, as you know, Steve. It's we can't boil the ocean. That never works. So we're always looking at one thing at a time and really building off those existing trends we have.
Super interesting, Derek. It gives so much texture to something that we always talk about. I mean, everyone in the field talks about that this is a race that just keeps accelerating. And the minute you think you have something locked down, you find out that you probably don't, or there's another way around it. And I have a lot of colleagues who would really like to join those quarterly meetings that you folks have. So if you don't invite us, maybe we'll try to break in. Let me go to Claire. Claire, probably you're facing similar kinds of challenges from a different perspective. One of the world's most important, let's call it, digital ecosystem infrastructure providers, if you think about the chip as at the base of everything we do, but also a business perhaps a little bit unlike Derek's and Dr. J's, that is one of the more capital intensive businesses in the world. How does it look from your perspective?
It looks interesting. Every company offers a different picture, and all kinds of high-level initiatives on cybersecurity that I have participated in different geographies, the US, Europe, or even Australia, they always come to the same conclusion. There isn't one size that fits everyone. Every market segment and every organization have to adjust to what works the best for them, what's the most efficient. There are many parameters there, resources, expertise, the nature of business, the nature of preparedness. There are, of course, cross-cutting issues that are true for everyone, yet there isn't one size of, features or activities that would cover everything, all kinds of issues that every company faces when we are talking about cybersecurity. So Intel is interesting in that our products enable everything, all the digital infrastructure, yet our products are not directly customer facing. Our customers are the ones that build systems, or even the ones who build subsystems. And it is them, or even companies that work with them. Think about, Intel working with something like a company like HP and providing infrastructure for Google. So we always are mediated in the products that we provide. Yet, because our component is so essential, it also is always in the forefront. So there is this pressure that becomes greater and that we make incredible efforts to respond to as attacks become more sophisticated. We are somewhat mediated from some types of attacks because considering the nature of the processors, all attacks on processors work better, or most attacks work better in physical proximity when there is a physical connection to the device. But of course, we are also responsive to our customer problems. The customer implementations that we have affect what we have, and our direct customers affect our indirect customers. As a result, very complex processes were put together, such as multi-party secure vulnerability disclosure and mediation processes that allow us to keep a stable infrastructure. Us, I mean everyone, the society, and that allows Intel and other companies to respond as quickly as possible in as coordinated a way as possible to all kinds of threats. On the other end of the spectrum, there is also, as Derek mentioned, this optimistic part of the picture. We get more and more tools, many of them actually driven by the increased computational power that allow us to look at the problems in a much more sophisticated context. A lot of things can be done in terms of building secure products, responding to cybersecurity threats in this new environment. Cybersecurity was mentioned already, as something that benefits from these technologies and responds to them directly. For instance, artificial intelligence is making forays into all kinds of industrial productions, including the factory floor, allowing manufacturers to work much more efficiently. It also allows us to evaluate threats in a much more efficient manner. It allows our customers to be more responsive, to be more understanding of the environment around them. And there are a lot of other technologies, not necessarily driven by artificial intelligence, but always driven by increasing computing power. We are working with a number of researchers that really bring innovation to this space. Areas of automation that are almost commercially ready abound today. They are such areas as creating threat models automatically, creating technical requirements automatically based on those threat models, finding and fixing bugs automatically based on the two other parameters that I mentioned. And this, even though the race with the attackers continues to intensify, this gives those in the forefront of these automation efforts some level of advantage, because there are more things you can see, things you can fix quickly, and so on. So it's always, people and technology.
We just have a couple more minutes, so I want to ask one more quick question and give you each 1 minute to respond, no more. And it's a very self-serving question from the perspective of an academic institution. We like to ask ourselves sometimes, what will 3 years from now folks look at us and say, why weren't you working on this stuff 3 years ago when we needed you to be doing the basic research that would help us deal with the threats that we're now facing in, I guess we'd be talking 2024. So if you could give us one problem that CLTC could make progress on over the next couple of years, that in 2024, so you don't have to say, why weren't those people working on it back then? What is it we should be focused on?
You're going to think I'm crazy. about mentioning this, so just bear with me. You ever had that loaf of bread in the back of the pantry that you forgot about, and then you open it up like weeks later and you're like, what is that fuzzy green thing in the back left side of the pantry? I think our satellite systems are going to be the same way. We have 3,170 inactive satellites. I think if we don't figure out a way to make sure that there's still security around those, the dark web is going to migrate into our satellite systems, and the adversary is going to own a lot of those inactive satellites. That's my
digital space junk, as it were.
Yes.
Derek.
All right. First of all, I agree. That's a very interesting subject. And we are actually looking at SATCOM threats, base stations, and there's threats knocking on those doors today. I can tell you that. So absolutely agree. Really quickly within my minute, Steve, what I think we're going to be, so what we can work on now, what we need to get ahead of is solving the overconfidence in the industry. I think we just did a ransomware survey. So over 455 organizations globally, mostly CXO decision makers. Ransomware is perceived as the number one threat. They have a vast majority, according to our survey, 90 to 95% saying that they're very confident they could deal with a ransomware threat. But everything we read about in the news and see about paints a different story. I'm looking at the security stack. A lot of it is network based and not security focused right now. Things that should be at the top, like breach and attack simulation, deception technologies, all ZTNA, all these sorts of things are not. And it's a bad formula that's shaping up right now. And I think we need to get ahead of that. That comes with preparedness. In long story short, preparedness, education, helping with that skills gap, but really bringing the reality into focus, because the risk is much higher than the investment upfront for these things.
Super interesting. I think some people call it the Lake Wobegon phenomenon. Others refer to the observation that everybody thinks they're an above average driver. Same thing. And even after this much time, Claire, what do we need to do?
Two things in a minute. One is making security an integral part of computer science education. Even those developers that specialize in security, we have to train to understand security as an integral feature of what they are doing when they write even the smallest piece of code. The second thing is also simple. Everything these days becomes legacy technology in about 18 months. Creating a framework where we can understand the developer intent. We had a project that started looking at it, intent semantics for the developers, but it's broader than that. So understanding the developer intent will allow us to overcome a lot of issues in legacy systems that create concerns and develop additional vulnerabilities today. If this is resolved, probably 50% of issues will not be with us.
Very interesting. One of the things that we've always stuck to at CLTC is to try to start things and end things on time. And I want to respect that today. I do want to thank all three of you for engaging in this conversation. Sort of like the reason we have a research exchange is to exchange research and exchange ideas. And this is exactly the spirit in which I hope everybody appreciated the comments. Could have continued this conversation for a lot longer, and I hope one day we can do it in person. When I came to Berkeley 30 some odd years ago, this is exactly what I thought I'd want to be doing, and I'm so glad I got the chance to do it with the three of you today and with my colleagues from CLTC.